So what can the two Chinese opium wars fought in the 19th century teach us about the potential ban of TikTok in the United States?
So I'm currently on a flight potentially being paid for by the Chinese government so I can go meet Bernie Sanders. That might sound very unusual, but it's actually an interesting story. The other day, I got this email from this lady who works at TikTok, and she asked me if I had any interest in going down to Washington, D.C. for some meetings. Well, I don't know, that's kind of intriguing, and particularly when you look at what's going on with TikTok right now.
But we do begin tonight with the heated battle over the future of TikTok here in the U.S. Tonight, the House, by an overwhelming majority, Democrats and Republicans, passing a measure to ban the Chinese-owned app here in the U.S.
Things are looking rather dire for America's favorite short-form dopamine delivery device.
Dead to me, R.I.P. buried. Angry mouth coming for your pitchforks ready.
The only thing all 535 members of Congress can agree on is to ban TikTok. That's it. That's the only thing.
Good morning, everybody. Figured I'd give you a quick farm update. Toby and I have been out here last couple of minutes getting water set, getting everything ready for the day to begin. I jumped on the TikTok bandwagon back in 2019. Just a simple soul sharing my farm life with the world.
So our new livestock guardian puppy, Abby, has become somewhat of an escape artist.
And then boom, before you know it, this little app explodes in popularity during the pandemic, and I end up racking up more than 2 million followers and more than 80 million video likes. You'd think I'd be head over heels with this app, right? Well, you're wrong. Because even though TikTok has been good to me, I really think it's horrible. It's glitchy, it's addictive, and don't even get me started on TikTok Shop. It's an absolute QVC fever dream nightmare that turned a perfectly good time waster into a place more toxic than Facebook Marketplace. Okay, maybe it's about as toxic as Facebook Marketplace. Now, if TikTok were to get the boot, my world wouldn't end. I still have audiences on Facebook and YouTube and even a few folks on Instagram. But the real punchline is this whole ban thing, it does have me worried for a much bigger reason. It silences free speech, it creates a duopoly for Meta and Alphabet, and it sets a precedent for future actions against other companies with very unintended consequences. So since TikTok asked me to come down to Washington, D.C. to meet with them, they offered to cover my travel costs. And since I was going to be in Washington, D.C. already, I decided to take advantage of that fact, and I want to use it to make a little field trip to Capitol Hill and express my unique farm-tending video posting POV. In today's video, we're going to be going on quite the adventure where we're covering the landscape of politics, celebrity, social media, propaganda, espionage, international trade,
The Opium Wars,
and how these days they all seem to work together.
Anyway, it's free and it's better to take you a tour for over $1,000. Welcome to Washington, D.C.
So do you guys know about the Opium Wars? I think they are a fascinating chapter in global history, and if you're not familiar, please allow me to give you a quick summary. So here we are in the 19th century, and the British are guzzling tea like there's no tomorrow. They are loving the stuff, and they're importing it from China. They're also importing porcelain, and they're importing silk, and getting all of this stuff from China. But the problem is, there's a big trade imbalance, and that China is giving them a lot of stuff, and they're only able to pay silver in return. That is draining the British coffers, and so the British, in their colonial wisdom, think, how do we flip this? And their eyes turn to India, a British colony at the time. And in India, they are sitting on mountains of opium. This opium causes a light bulb moment for the British. And in this period of British history, the British Empire often had private corporations with royal charters that operated and did their bidding. So by the late 18th century, the East India Company held a monopoly on the production and sale of opium in British-controlled territories in India. They recognized the lucrative potential of trading that opium for Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain, which were all in super high demand in Britain as well as broader Europe. Now, they were fully aware of Chinese prohibitions against opium, but the East India Company didn't directly try to trade the opium to China. Instead, they sold off the opium at auction in Calcutta to private British traders, who then took that opium and smuggled it into China. This allowed both the East India Company and the British Empire to maintain a degree of plausible deniability regarding the illegal opium trade. Now, the Chinese emperor is not amused. Opium's wreaking havoc, and they're losing money, and so he's like, enough. So he appoints this guy to put an end to it all. Lin's a no-nonsense guy, and he seizes the opium, destroys it, and basically tells the British, get out of here. The British traders in the East India Company throw a fit like toddlers, and under that pressure, the British Empire flexes their military muscles, and boom, you have the start of the First Opium War. The British, with their ships and their guns and their industrial-era war technology, they trounce the much more antiquated Chinese who struggle to understand how the British are able to fight while wearing such tight trousers. And the victory of British forces in that First Opium War were supported by the naval and military power of the East India Company, and it ultimately led to the Treaty of Nanking in 1842. This treaty forced China to cede Hong Kong to Britain, giving Britain this foothold right near China. And the Chinese were also forced to open up 5 ports to trade and legalize the opium trade, marking a significant expansion of Western influence into China. Whew. I'm not going to say I missed it, but it is kind of nice to be back in Washington, D.C. I guess I find this whole situation so unbelievable and ironic because TikTok is by far my least favorite social media platform.
Of course, would you look at this thing that they left for me? I kind of wonder what it is. I guess this mallet is meant to smash it. Just made a mess.
3:28 a.m.
I've been sleeping like hot garbage all night. I usually wake up around 4:30 or 5 o'clock, so I figured I just might as well get up. And since I have nobody to talk to right now, I figured I'd talk to you guys. I think one of the things that I find really disingenuous about the legislation related to the TikTok ban is that proponents of that legislation will tell you that it's not really a TikTok ban.
Our intention is for TikTok to continue to operate, but not under the control of the Chinese Communist Party.
Because in reality, they're really just trying to force the sale of TikTok to some other entity that's not Chinese owned.
This is not an attempt to ban TikTok. It's an attempt to make TikTok better. Tic-tac-toe, a winner.
Because there's some real grave concern about what the Chinese government could do to weaponize TikTok as a propaganda platform. And I understand where that concern is coming from, but the toothpaste has been long since out of the tube on this one. You know, if you go back, say, 50 years ago when there were a lot more American-made things, the argument for saying that Americans should really be using American products and that's just how we need to operate, I kind of actually get it more. But if you look at the neoliberal policies that we as a country have pushed forth over those past 50 years, we have long since entangled ourselves with China to the point where I can't look around and not see elements of Chinese technology everywhere. I mean, the camera that I'm shooting this on right now is Japanese because it's made by Sony. But this camera that I use, like the one that I was using in the airport, like this is Chinese made. I don't want to take it apart, but my microphone is Chinese made. Even though my watch is an Apple Watch and it was designed in Cupertino, California, it was made in China. Same thing goes for my iPhone. And every one of these pieces of technology possesses the ability to transfer data that's really important about me and who I am to some other company. And so sure, they could probably ban TikTok, but at the end of the day, they're going to still have the problem of all these other elements of Chinese technology if we truly feel like China is this hostile threat that we need to be watchful for. Which I don't personally believe, but there's lots of folks out there who do think that.
The danger of TikTok is it gives the Chinese Communist Party enormous influence to shape the news, the content, and the information of the folks who look at it.
Of what nation are you a citizen?
Singapore.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Senator, I'm Singaporean. No.
Have you ever been associated or affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party?
No, Senator. Again, I'm Singaporean.
And then the other thing is that if you look at the legislation, I think there's like this 6-month window that allows for the sale of TikTok from ByteDance to some other entity that is not Chinese owned. But the only problem is, who the heck is going to buy it? You know, when the bank bailouts were happening in 2008 and 2009, there was the term of too big to fail often being thrown around because the banks played such a large role in our financial system that there was no way for them to go bankrupt without toppling everything else. I think that when I look at a sale of TikTok, that seems rather impossible too, because they're just too big to sell. I mean, the last major sale of a social media platform was Twitter to Elon Musk. And that was a dumpster fire for so many gosh darn reasons. I think Elon Musk paid something like, I think it was like $43 or $44 billion to buy Twitter. And to be very clear, the value of Twitter 2 years ago is significantly lower than the value of TikTok is today. If I'm looking at the rough estimates for what TikTok and the TikTok related entities would be worth in a sale, at least at the end of 2023, it was $84 billion. So there are not a lot of companies out there that would be able to put up that kind of cash. In fact, the only companies that I could see legitimately buying TikTok where it makes sense for their business as well as they have the cash to do it would be Alphabet, Meta, Apple, Microsoft.
Monopoly's been good to me. Very, very good.
And so while the concerns of a Chinese propaganda machine might be reduced by any of those sales, my concerns about what all of this stuff are doing to our society only get much, much, much worse. Because we're still going to have large corporations with lots of data about all of us, and they're going to be selling it and trading it like you wouldn't believe. We're still going to have a dopamine-fueled social media addiction that's making us more and more isolated as a society. Misinformation is still going to be weaponized on social media platforms and continue to distort our society. The legislation that's currently on the table to ban TikTok is just simply us taking our shoes off at the airport in order to make us safer. It's entirely theatrical and performative, and it doesn't really address any of the core problems.
Yeah, let's see how you do under pressure. I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Okay. Hey. Yeah. Ain't no errors, baby, it's a new era. I wake up early, feeling rich like I'm Kesha. I get to the paper, boy. Extra, extra.
I can't forget the camera for this. Come on, guys.
So it's been more than a solid 2 years since I gotten dressed up for a day of work like this. And actually, other than when I went to my neighbor's funeral last year, it's been easily 3 years since I've actually worn a tie. I do find the whole thing very off-putting, but I guess when in Rome, right? Now, after consulting with my attorney, Dr. Gonzo, as well as my second attorney, Saul Goodman, I do feel like in this video I need to make one thing abundantly clear. My joking introduction aside, I am here in Washington, D.C. to meet with both TikTok and Senator Sanders. And so TikTok paid for my flight, they paid for my hotel room, and so I want to be exceptionally transparent about that fact. But I was actually the one who made the request to Senator Sanders' office to meet with him. And because I'm a citizen and resident of Vermont, you know, senators will often meet with you if you're a resident, particularly if you're in Washington, D.C., to meet with them. But that truth is so much more complicated and less interesting for a good clickbaity thumbnail, so bear with me, guys. So after the dust settled from the first Opium War, you'd think everyone would be cool, right? Well, you're wrong. So the ink's barely dry on the Treaty of Nanking, and Britain's like, you know what? This isn't working for us. We want more. Now, the spark that lit the fuse was ridiculously trivial. A Chinese-owned, British-registered ship called the Arrow got boarded by Chinese officials in Canton, and the British used this as an excuse to kick off the war. It was pretty much like starting a bar fight because somebody looked at you funny. This time, though, it's not just about opium. It's about opening all of China's doors, windows, and even the cat flap to Western trade. Britain and France, with their superior military technology, teamed up and they just started banging on China's doors with cannons. The war trundled on and it wasn't pretty. China tried to hold its own, but it was about as competitive as a Washington Generals game. The highlight? The British and French forces marched to Beijing, and in a move that was part vandalism, part psychological warfare, they burnt down the Summer Palace. And in the end, China signed the Treaty of Tientsin, which was like the Treaty of Nanking, but even more lopsided. More ports open, more trade, foreigners could roam freely, and there was even the full legalization of opium. This whole debacle, from the opium trade to the burning of the Summer Palace, kicked off what's known as the Century of Humiliation. It was a time when China, a once mighty empire, was carved up like a Thanksgiving turkey by foreign powers. The impact? It was deep and lasting. And it wasn't just about the land or the money. It was a psychological blow. A loss of national pride and independence that the Chinese still talk about to this very day. Apparently this is where the TikTok office is. I probably can't film, so I'm gonna have to say goodbye for a few minutes. So after signing several NDAs and getting a nice little gift basket, I spent a couple of hours at the TikTok office having conversations with them about data security, their algorithms, the influence of China over those algorithms, things that I should be thinking about as a TikTok creator, things that they're doing to support TikTok creators, and really all of the things that you need to know about Project Texas, which after threats of a sale back in 2019, they established as a partnership with Oracle, where Oracle actually has custody over the American user data. I wish I had something interesting to share here, but it really was just a bunch of meetings. But after I finished up with the TikTok team, it was time for me to head over to the Senate buildings. And I'm now at the Capitol, and it's just about time for my meeting, and so I'm going to go in and see what happens here.
5 hours later.
So let me start with the bummer news right out of the gate. Unfortunately, Senator Sanders got called into an interview with the media.
If we do not get a handle on the crisis of climate change, the planet that we are leaving our kids and grandchildren will become increasingly uninhabitable.
And so he wasn't able to join for the meeting, but I was able to chat with his policy team, and it was a really good conversation. Conversation topics included data security, data custody, election influence concerns, technology monopolies and antitrust, how TikTok's algorithm works, how YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram's algorithms all work, how content creators make money, the awesomeness of the darn tough sock company. It was so crazy though, chatting with those guys, talking about like how the whole process works, which is something I know absolutely nothing about, but they seem to have a really good grasp of it. And I feel like I learned a lot just by being in those conversations. After I talked to Senator Sanders' team, I ended up talking to Senator Welch's team, and it was really good conversation. And I hope I was able to highlight for them some of my concerns, and they really brought up some of the key issues that folks are focused on and concerned with there. And yes, I'm very glad that I did this. It was very interesting to see, and I'm very curious to see what comes next. Of course, what's actually happening for me is I actually got to go back to TikTok now for some more meetings, so come with me. I'm actually in TikTok's office. They have like a karaoke room and a DJ room. I think this right here is their DJ room. I don't know. These tech companies always have such cool, funky offices. Like when I worked in an office, I always worked at like an insurance company or an investment company, which have offices that are so deadly serious and like severe. And yeah, that's not the vibe here. Like it's post-industrial mixed with funky fun. It's pretty cool. And particularly as I contrast the office here to the Senate building, it definitely has a different vibe too. You know, that was actually my first time ever going to the Senate, like a Senate building. I don't know. I feel like I went to the House of Representatives when I was a kid, but I don't think we ever went to the Senate building. Our government is just like people working a job in an office, you know, and everything from the Senate cafeteria and what that looked like to the hallway conversations I would see people having with their normal colleagues, much like you'd have a hallway conversation with anybody you work with. It really brought home for me this idea that we make such a big deal out of like our government and making it this entity that nobody knows, and it's this big, unknowable and ununderstandable force, when the reality is it's just people doing normal people stuff. I mean, I guess I could even say the same thing for TikTok here. Like earlier, I came into TikTok after my meetings and I was hungry, and they were like, oh, you should just go to our little break room area and you can make yourself a bowl of cereal. And that's exactly what I did. And so while my big hope was I was going to be able to meet Bernie Sanders and like talk to him about my concerns related to TikTok, and I might be a little bit disappointed by that, I also have to recognize that probably the conversations that I did have with folks are going to be maybe more helpful and more useful. So I guess that right there is kind of the positive. The one funny thing, though, to me that does come up is when I think about, well, why am I so disappointed that I didn't get the chance to meet Bernie? I think it comes down to celebrity and the fact that, Bernie Sanders, the guy's kind of an icon. He's kind of a legend. He's arguably one of the most memeable human beings in our government. But when I contrast that idea of his celebrity profile versus the meat and potatoes actions and activities when it comes into play with government and governance, there's a difference between the sausage and how it's made. Look, I will definitely say that I am a person of the viewpoint that celebrity has ruined politics for us, arguably just as much, if not more, than social media.
Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money, dollar bill, y'all. I grew up on the crime side, the New York Times side. Staying alive was no jive. Had second hands, mom's bounce on old man, so then we moved to the Shaolin land.
Hello?
Hey, Morgan.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, good. Are you still on the hill?
I am not.
Are you comfortable, talking on the record on this?
Yeah, definitely. I think that they're very real concerns, but I think what this doesn't address them really. It's more theater. I think that there's significant concerns when it comes to social media across the board in terms of, security risks. I think that there's issues in terms of mental health, but I don't see anything with the current bill that really addresses either of those things.
Later.
Do you guys see that house right there? That's where I used to live when I lived in Washington, D.C. And those garden beds right there, I actually ripped up my entire front lawn and my neighbors actually thought I was crazy. But I used to grow vegetables right there. In fact, those garden beds were where my agricultural career got started. And yeah, it's kind of weird to be back here like this. It definitely evokes a certain sense of nostalgia, not in a way where it's I wish I was back here and I want to be back here, because I most definitely don't. I don't know, just the passing of time and recognizing that that was a time and that time is no longer now. I don't know, do you guys ever feel that sense of nostalgia? I do think a lot of Americans feel a sense of nostalgia for a world gone by. Wistful for a time when it felt like it was easier to be an American. Think back to the second season of The Wire, when Frank Sabatka would talk about how nobody in America builds things anymore.
We used to make in this country, build shit. Now we just put our hand in the next guy's pocket.
I think sometimes we all kind of feel that vibe.
They used to make steel then, no?
Where you feel like the days when you could just walk out there, get a job, and be able to afford a house and a new car every couple of years and put your kids through college was something that was open to you and available to you, and essentially an expected part of the American dream. But if you're out there feeling like that, I think you need to recognize a couple of things. In that, number one, that was probably a very limited amount of time in American history, and that time won't probably be happening again, or at least anytime again soon. I think number two, even though it might have felt like that for you and your family, it probably didn't feel like that for everybody's family. And even when you look back on the glory days, there were still a lot of folks struggling, and there were a lot of folks who feel like they didn't have access to their fair share or their fair deal. And essentially, who drank your milkshake? A lot of folks are going to be quick to blame a country like China, but I feel like the reality is we kind of did that to ourselves. The tax, economic, and trade laws that we monkeyed with over the last, 40, 50 years, pretty much my entire lifetime, those were the things that essentially upset the apple cart. But what you gonna do? I know what I'm gonna do is actually ride back to my hotel so I can go catch my flight to go back to the farm.
Ay, amor, no te preocupes, que yo siempre de quererte, de amarte y admirarte. Ay, amor, no te preocupes, lo que siento yo por vos es cada vez más fuerte.
Well, welcome back to Vermont. Hey, Toby Dog. Hey, Abby Dog. It's good to see you guys. Hi. Don't jump up on me. Hi. All right, come on. We got chores to do. Let's go. Come on.